Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Today is a day that I am utterly exhausted, so I'm probably going to go through this one a little bit quicker. Apologies if that means some shorter answers or even just a lightning round that's longer with more shorter answers, but I am tired, and I still have some stuff that I really need to get done because I've got like a 13-hour stream day tomorrow. Pleasant, but having a good time all the same. So with that, let's thank our sponsors, or let's thank those of you over on Patreon, I should say, and move on in to the Q&A. Thank you to those of you over on Patreon for supporting the channel. There's no mandatory reason to do it. You just do it, and you're awesome for it. So thank you to all of you over there. Also, special shout out to our patrons of darkness, Khuja, Cross on Jenova, and Kurenai Oni, going above and beyond. And shout out to all of you for tuning in and watching. Now let's see if I can survive getting through this without falling back asleep after my nap. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hi. Hope I'm not too late here. No, this was today, and this works. I'm concerned that Living Dead is still going to be a pain for non-white mages, made worse by the fact that they're adding another healer. Do you feel like lower max HP totals made healing any easier, or are the 90 kits more equipped to deal with larger single-target healing? Well, the first is definitely no. There's nothing particular about lowering the max HP that makes healing easier, because the healing values are equally as diminished. And I think that Living Dead has always been one of those tools that people look at in the situation where people have to panic heal it, as opposed to actually planning heals around it. In most endgame content, a tool like Living Dead is planned around. It's very rarely something where you're like, oh, that was a complete surprise. And when it is, it's usually to make up for something that would have otherwise been far, far worse. So I don't really feel the same issues with Living Dead. That doesn't mean I don't think they couldn't have given it any sort of quality of life, such as increasing the healing received during that time by 20%, at least from direct spells or something of that regard. But I don't think any of the particular kits made it any easier, but I don't think it was ever that difficult to do. It's just one of those things where, are you rebalancing it around what happens in like a random dungeon when somebody pops Living Dead and the healer isn't paying enough attention to heal them to full, or doesn't have the tools required to actually get it done in a reasonable time, or versus a situation where you're mostly seeing it used, which is where you know Living Dead is going to happen in endgame content, and thus it can be planned around in its entirety. So it's a tough balance back and forth, but I don't think you're going to see any difference from before dealing with Living Dead, regardless of Sage being added or any of the new abilities being added. This one doesn't have a hashtag, but I definitely see that it's a question. Hello, Haps. Hope you're doing well. Long-time watcher, first-time asker, so I come crossing my fingers you might see this one. Well, adding the hashtag would have ensured it, but at the very least I caught it on my own, so I gotcha. After the media tour, I've seen a lot of agonizing over burst windows, pre-pull timers to line up with those burst windows, and analyzing the design and playability of the jobs from the perspective of those burst windows. It can be argued that it's healthier for the game to move away from the concept of jobs only being fast-paced, frenetic, and fun during those burst windows. The fights are designed to be cleared regardless of the fact does it really matter if things don't line up perfectly, so long as the rotations and mechanics are interesting and challenging. It feels like a player-created concept is being used to criticize design that is tailored more towards the latter than the former. Your thoughts? So the big thing around performance is this will happen no matter what you do. You can make them fast-paced, frenetic, and fun outside of a burst window, but that isn't going to change people's perspective of optimizing those jobs. And if they fall out of a window of optimization, they are going to be criticized. It is going to affect people's opinion on those jobs in the raid scene, and it is going to lead to people actively not wanting to party with particular jobs, even if they don't fully understand why they're being told that it's a more or less effective option to go with a specific job. So while I think, could they do this? And actually, I would say that they absolutely do this. It's just you're most powerful at those 60 and 120 second marks, and everything you do should be kind of in line with preparing for those methods. But you don't see jobs go completely brain dead in between those 60 and 120 second markers. It's just that those are the most important moments, and thus creating the outliers in your DPS is really one of the most important things to proving you have a mastery or to improve your performance overall. So I guess the answer is kind of a non-answer, in that no matter what you do, people are going to break it down to a numerical game, and it is going to trickle down to people who don't understand, or even if they don't necessarily care, and it's going to affect their gameplay overall. So I think the devs understand that, and they understand that they should have that in mind based on the way the community reacts to things and just based on the way MMO players react to these kind of things, which is why they're leveling them out to these 60 and 120-second marks with just mostly playing maintenance in between there. And I think they're doing a pretty good job at it. Summoner is a great example of a job where your maintenance is understanding when it's best to go into a specific primal in a specific encounter. You have jobs that make sure they have to keep up buffs or debuffs, such as, you know, just personal damage buffs or dots during downtimes that they have to maintain. They want to manage their resources going into those 60 and 120-second marks. They have to weigh that against encounter timings and things along the lines. And I think there actually is a really good balance of that, but that's never going to change the fact that at certain points in the fight, people will be hitting harder and bursting harder if things properly align. And that's always going to be something that the devs have to keep in mind, that the community will somewhat enforce going into serious endgame content. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hope you're doing well. No hello, but at least you wish me well, so I'll accept it. Relatively new to the channel, want to say I really enjoy these Q&A videos. Glad you enjoy them. For my actual question, as someone who has bounced off Final Fantasy IX repeatedly, it is nice to hear someone else put it near the bottom of the ranking. It'd be interesting to hear what you specifically dislike. Also, outside of 11 and 14, what is your favorite numbered game of the series? Well, not my favorite. I feel 12 is underrated and I have it in my top 4. 12 recently broke into my top 3 just because of Zodiac Age. Before that, it was very close to my bottom 3. 9 is a mix of things. Right off the bat, I just am not invested in the vast majority of the characters, and that would be enough to kind of push it more towards the bottom. Realistically, Vivi's one of the only characters I properly care about in that game, and while Zidane is a nice take on a protagonist that's not brooding and depressed, and I do appreciate that, I also don't find him particularly interesting or able to be invested in emotionally in any capacity, so I do consider that pretty heavily. But then there's gameplay elements that are hidden from the player. The way level ups are done, being based on your total stats, or I guess specifically on your bonus stats that you get from gear, is a big turnoff for me. I don't mind a mechanic like that being in a game, but I like to be told about it. And when there's these kind of like secret hidden mechanics beneath the surface that the game doesn't really do a great job of educating the player about, it just leads to frustrating things. It's one of those games where if I knew less about it, I'd probably like it more. That also goes with the way the ATB system works, how the game functions on both an ATB clock and a real clock. What I mean by that is that buffs and debuffs function on the game's in-game timer, the thing that tracks how long you've been playing, and thus a buff can last 45 seconds. But it doesn't matter if there's an animation going off. If your buff is wearing off, it's wearing off. So you could be in the middle of an animation and a buff could wear off, and thus you'll take a bunch of bonus damage. This has happened to me repeatedly on the Hill Gigas later in the game, where I have float on all my characters to prevent earthquake, but during the earthquake animation, I lose the float status, and those characters just get massacred by the earthquake spell. So the fact that it even exists upset me. However, on the flip side, it is abusable, as in you can use things like auto regen to abuse the in-game clock, because buffs do the same thing. So you'll see very frequently long summon timers being abused to auto regen back to full HP. And while it's a nice little abuse of the system, I'd still rather the system not operate like that in the first place and look to a more consistent game mechanic. But there's all sorts of other little things. The Excalibur 2, I think, is one of the dumbest weapons that has ever been put in a game. I'm not really invested in most of the side characters either. There's a couple that I like, Beatrix, of course, but Queen Braun and even Khuja sometimes has moments where I'm not interested in him until way later in the game when he starts losing his mind and has that sort of redemption for himself towards the end where he kind of comes to terms with what he is. But realistically, I just like Vivi. That's it. Oh, and not to mention Chocobo Hot and Cold, and the game's just utterly slow. If that game didn't have speed up, I can never play it again. I will never play Final Fantasy IX without having speed up turned on all the time, because it is so atrociously slow, even compared to the other PlayStation 1 era games. So I've got my fair share of problems with Final Fantasy IX. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Good time of day. Happy. I like that. Good time of day to you too. As Paladin main, I find myself being on two minds in the new abilities. On one hand, they look awesome. On the other hand, well, that's the question. Cool. I'm glad you left it for that. I find myself being somewhat disappointed that what is essentially Fast Blade, Riot Blade, and Goring Blade is all being stacked upon the Goring Blade combo, forcing pre-existing paladins to have to relearn their muscle memory for optimal play. Hold on, let me read the rest. I had a similar sentiment about Hyosho Ranryu last expansion. So I guess the question is, as minor thing is, do you think it's worth bringing up the potential point of improvement, especially when it comes to new player experience? I feel like it's a barrier for... I don't know if I even understand the question. What do you mean? I find myself being somewhat disappointed that what is essentially Fast Blade, Riot Blade, and Goring Blade is all being stacked upon the Goring Blade combo. But yeah, because that's the combo that you... Are you... Wait, hold on. I feel like this is... What is meant to be asked here is that the Goring Blade combo is being placed onto these new Confiteor skills, and thus, instead of leaving Confiteor and going into Goring Blade, you now have these extra 3 button presses that are part of Confiteor, which means you have to now convince yourself to go from that into Royal Authority combo. That's the only thing that in my head makes sense, because... Otherwise, you're asking, it looks like the wording is, why is the Goring Blade combo the Goring Blade combo? That's what the question looks like, which just doesn't make any sense. And no, I don't think this is a problem at all. I mean, we're constantly learning and adapting every expansion, and this is a one button that becomes 3 different buttons that fulfills the goal of pressing another series of buttons, but is way stronger, and thus has very little muscle memory involved in it. So... this is the kind of thing that gets fixed, like, mentally, like, muscle memory-wise, in about 5 minutes. So, unless I just don't understand the question, there's literally no issue with what they're doing with this. In fact, this is probably the best way they could have done what they're doing with the Confiteor combo at the end of the day. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hey, Haps, I hope you're doing well. Same to you. This is the first time I'm asking something for the weekly Q&A, but I felt compelled to do so after watching your Media Tour videos. Welcome. It's about Monk. It's overall looking amazing, but I'm a bit bummed how underwhelming Riddle of Wind is. Part of Monk's identity being around speed. Do you think they'll eventually give us a cooldown to boost our skill speed for a short period of time? So if you watch my interview, I actually spoke with Yoshi P about this, and he specifically said they considered making it a skill speed buff originally, but that they leaned away from this overall. Now, keep in mind, if they had made it a skill speed buff, then it would actually be one of the weirdest skill speed buffs. How do I explain this? The way that optimization is done on our jobs is very much based on what global cooldown we expect to be in a vacuum situation at any given point of the fight. And then, of course, adjusting that around what is the reality of what a fight will allow us to accomplish via forced downtime or having to swap targets or any sort of skill that an individual encounter demands of us. So by increasing skill speed, they essentially would need to completely re-timeline the job to make sure that you can go into your correct abilities at the correct time. Otherwise, if they don't have a grasp on that, then players usually find loopholes and things they can abuse to actually do stuff that's way stronger than is intended, or the job ends up being way weaker than intended. So it's a very, very careful balancing act, which is why you just don't see that much in the way of skill speed adjustments that aren't maintained, like Huton or what used to be Grease Lightning or Samurai's speed buff, because they want it to be, they're generally expecting the player to maintain that buff at all times, and they can balance around the thought of that being what the player is doing. So I don't think they'll ever give us a buff that increases skill speed. Instead, I do think they will keep with this auto attack thing, but I also don't find this very interesting. So if they wanted to change this to something else, I wouldn't mind. If they ever decide they want to give us a speed increase, as long as it's properly balanced around fight timers and the actual job's game mechanics, then it should be a-okay. But I don't think we'll see that ever. I think we're just never going to see like short-term skill speed buffs in this game ever again. They've just shied away from them too much. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Good day, Happy. Hope you can get some sleep in reserve before the release. It's not working so far. It's a bit of a weird question. We know that from 6.1 forward, there'll be a brand new plot line starting, but how do you think they'll manage to tell a brand new story while keeping us in the current map, even if those zones will be new from 6.0? Usually when the new chapter of the current plot line is unfolded, we get an expansion with it with new areas to explore, so it feels a bit strange to have a completely new arc without going somewhere new. Any thoughts on that? No, because we barely even understand the areas we've been to. So I think a lot is lost on people when we look at the number of new zones we get at the beginning of expansion. So we look at 6.0, we know we're getting 6 new zones. We already know what 4 of them are. We know what 1 of them looks like, and then the 6th one is a complete mystery. However, people very rarely consider what it's like when they design things for new dungeons, for temporary areas like Turncliffe, and for wide field areas like Bozja, or a deep dungeon like Palace of the Dead in Heaven on High. Those are largely meant to expand the world without actually expanding our explorable areas. This has been true throughout the previous expansions as well, with going to places like Pagalthon or the Anti-Tower, all these other things that have existed right beneath our feet, but we've never interacted with them. So a world doesn't just have to grow like this. A world can also grow like this. And that's something that I think they're definitely going to be leaning on going into 6.1 forward, but also giving us the opportunity to get a little bit more in tune with the various areas that we are visiting. You know, maybe there is something in these places that doesn't just pertain to the story that we're wrapping up right now. There's hints and teases to things to come that we don't really fully understand yet. Characters that come from faraway lands and bring themselves into our story, kind of teasing and setting up other areas we can go to, other areas we can visit, getting us excited, kind of teasing us, you know, with the carrot on the stick kind of situation. So I don't think there's any issue at all, and I think they're well aware that the challenges that come with starting a new story without necessarily starting a new expansion in the same time. And I have confidence that they'll probably handle it with grace. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hi, how are you? Hi, I'm doing fine. Hopefully the same for you. I'm going to go off on a tangent, so bear with me. Well, I'm assuming it sets up the question, so I guess I'll have to bear with you because otherwise I don't have a question to answer. Dark Knight has not seen a significant single change to its overall kit. 1, 2, 3 combos are boring, no changes to its defensive abilities, no way to self-sustain, blood weapon, and living dead being useless. I'm so disappointed and frustrated. My favorite job in the story and aesthetic perspective is still just a warrior job that isn't fun, while some of the changes to some of the other tanks are so buffed, it becomes an issue too big to ignore. For that reason, I will not level up Dark Knight just so I can get some useless trait like Unmend. Oh, enhanced Unmend. My question is, to you as Dark Knight, and from your POV, from all the changes, the worst job in Endwalker? Because I have to ask myself, why bring a Dark Knight to any Savage Extreme when other tanks overshadow it completely? They don't overshadow it completely, is the thing. I think you're mistaking not having anything fun or exciting as something being inherently weak. Oblation and TBN, having access to both of those, is insanely powerful from a defensive perspective. Not to mention that the more I've kind of become in tune with Dark Knight, the less I agree with the notion that it is in any way like Warrior, outside of the fact that Delirium and Inner Release are effectively the same ability, especially now more so almost. I do agree with certain things like Blood Weapon, for example. I also think that Abyssal Drain could probably use some changes. But I wouldn't in any way say the reason why there is no significant change to the overall kit is because the job is overall powerful. It's like all the other tanks. It kind of has been this entire time, and it will probably continue to be so. Living Dead's also not useless, but we had this discussion earlier about how planning around it is effectively the same. But I do think that the Home Gang 10-second and Super Bolide 10-second shit shouldn't happen. That shouldn't exist. Either that or they do need to change both Hallowed Ground and Living Dead, in my opinion. No, I don't think I don't think there is really a worse job. If anything, White Mages probably should probably be under the most potential criticism, just because their new abilities are almost impossible to use with the way that the Lily Bell actually works, and they'll probably just continue to be a glare bot. So I'd say that if anything, White Mages would fall into that category, and it's not even that it's the worst job. It got the least exciting changes and the least effective changes. And when Dark Knight kind of falls into that category in and of itself. And I mean, you also say that Scholar may be a meme, but at least it can heal itself. But Scholar's not a meme. The only thing that's a meme about Scholar is the fact that Expedience boosts your speed. But Expedience is incredibly powerful. Scholars are going to be massively powerful at the beginning of the expansion. They're going to be either equal to or greater than a Sage, most likely, in terms of their overall functionality, especially on 2-target encounters where they got a massive buff. So I think we're looking at these things from completely different perspectives, and that Dark Knight, while it may not necessarily be your cup of tea, and I think you're just kind of realizing that even though it has a cool story and a cool aesthetic, that the gameplay just doesn't match your expectations. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing to want. But we have to remember not to conflate that with a job being underperforming or not being powerful. The only tank ability I'm looking at and thinking maybe that probably should not be the way that it is Double Down being 1200, because that is ridiculous. Even if Gunbreakers are going to be doing some weird stuff to line up their burst windows now with all these extra things they have to press during it. But again, it's important to not conflate not enjoying something with it being a bad job, because these things are not one in the same. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hello, Haps. I have a quick 2-part question followed by a request for a feature to bring up to Yoshi during your bi-weekly design meetings via the red phone. All right, I'll be sure to write this down, assuming I agree with the idea. For the 2 new Ninja GCD gap closers during Ride Time, how did the animation lock feel? Insignificant. Almost like there wasn't one at all. It's like brief at the very beginning of it, but you don't ever really feel locked down in it for that long of a time. Yeah, it's really like a rough divide. Is kind of what I would equate it to. So I tell from the videos, most of the time the characters moving side by side. Additionally, was there any extra lock on weaving OG CDs? I'm not sure what you mean by extra lock, but there's nothing like Assassinate in Ninja anymore. I mean, the closest thing you have to Assassinate is Forked and Fleeting. So no, there's nothing else that was locked. I guess TCJ is technically a lock, you know, if you want to be technical about it. But no, that was it. So there's thank God Assassinate's not there anymore. Besides the new Summoner one, no other GCD gap closures come to mind, so I'm not sure what to expect. Yeah, no, there's nothing else. But the request, the lock to max range for ground targeting is super hype. Can we also have a quick cast on release, please? There's a few things I want from that. I also want mouse over being toggleable, so that way healers can choose to have it, but still have it interact with the spell queuing system. So mouse over as an option is something I want as well as the thing you've just suggested. So I'll add that to the list. This is a short one. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Thanks so much for your weekly answers. No, thank you for asking them. You didn't say hello, but again, you were very courteous, so I appreciate that. Do we know what content was originally planned for 2.0 but cut due to lack of time? I read a rumor that Ishgard was originally supposed to be in 2.0. Actually, we do know at least 3 things for certain. Crystal Tower was supposed to be out in 2.0, and it was originally, they were going to do highly difficult 24-man raids, but they found that in testing that there just wasn't a good balance of difficulty in the game, and that balancing the 24 players was something that was going to be a considerably difficult thing time-wise to make it as engaging or to make it as interesting. So they decided to adjust it to a 0.1 patch and use it as catch-up material instead. Ninja was supposed to be released on 2.0, but it didn't make the cut, so they instead pushed it back to 2.4. It is why it is the only class and job with Rogue and Ninja that is ever released in the middle of an expansion, in the middle of a new patch, and why they've never done that since. Ishgard was indeed supposed to be in 2.0, but they decided to scrap that and save it for a future storyline due to development. They were under very tough development things. And that's at least 3 that we know for certain. I'm sure there are more, but those are the 3 I can definitely name off the top of my head. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Haps, wanted to know what your thoughts are on Yoshida said about what they are designing for Bard. Currently, they're split between more damage and more support, and the community is split as well. Is it possible to make both sides happy? I don't think what was added Endwalker will do that, and Fury can end up with Bard getting another rear. Bard is going to be fucking great in Endwalker. If it stays exactly as is, Bard is going to be a fucking monolith of the ranged physical role. Now, it's not to say that Machinist and Dancer won't see play, it'll completely overshadow them, but I have a feeling that ranged physical mains are going to be leaning back towards Bard a lot more than they were in Shadowbringers. It just brings so many good tools, and its potencies and its rate of play are all a lot more fine-tuned than they were before. It'll still have the occasional finicacy with the double procs on Bloodletters, but it's going to be such a minor thing compared to what it was before that I have a feeling Bard is going to be fantastic. And honestly, I kind of like the balance of what they're going for in Endwalker Bard. It does have some more consistent, high-damaging tools that they can save up or plan around for big burst windows, and it also has more interesting buff alignments to consider, especially with that of Radiant Finale, which is going to be something that you're able to kind of adjust to certain parts of the fight, and a good Bard will use it whenever they think to use it. An excellent Bard will know exactly how to use it in any given encounter, so the skill expression is actually really good on that job without being punishing to people who don't fully grasp the best way to go about using Radiant Finale. So I actually have really high hopes for Bard in Endwalker. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Happy, what's up? I don't know why I read it that way, but you know what? We got there in the end. Hello, and welcome. I've been leveling in alt. I'm currently trudging through Stormblood and noticed a couple of things. One, I don't remember the peaks at all. I feel like we ran through it in 4.0 and then never revisited it. Did the devs forget about the peaks? And more importantly, 2, what's with the crazy magic-y ship on the mountains? Neon Crep's Hope. Oh, I talk about Neon Crep's Hope all the time. It was another thing that was going to be some piece of content completely forgotten by the devs. No, Neon Crep's Hope was actually a ship that was used to save a large number of people from the calamity of water, and it's, you know, once the floods had receded, that's where it was left. There's nothing content-wise that was planned for it. That's really just a big lore marker on the map. As for the peaks has one very major event, and honestly one of my favorite scenes in all of Stormblood, but it is at the end of the day just one of the ways that we are approaching, that you have to get to Alamigo. So it's kind of more like in the middle of the path zone and less of a super interesting or involved zone. You know, it's not like a Garlemald, or it's not like a Thavnair, it's not like the Moon, it's the peaks. You know, the fringes, the peaks, and the locks are all kind of just this one consistent, like, just escalation of situations as you lead into that final stretch of Stormblood's base story as a whole. So there's, I agree with you, the peaks aren't that exciting, but there is some pretty cool lore there. Also, the Ziggurat that's there is really cool as well. So there's a lot of little bit of lore bits, but it's definitely one of the less interesting Stormblood zones. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Happy, how you doing? I'm tired. I don't know how many more I'm doing before I just swap the lightning round because I've gone past a ton of questions already to save for the lightning round. A couple of quick questions that can probably go lightning round. Well, I guess I could have saved you for this, but it's too late now. On Red Mage, did you see whether or not Magnification still resets the movement skills now they have 2 charges? Yeah, I talked about it in my video. It gives you 1 charge of each of the movement skills. So it's going to make it very, very busy for off globals here. Does Magnification still work outside of combat? I believe it does, but I can't imagine a situation where you'd really want to do that. Maybe to set up for like a dungeon boss, but I don't think pre-pull Magnification is going to be the answer. I think we're probably going to see like 3rd GCD, but I have a big feeling you're not going to see pre-pull Magnifications. If I'm imagining a 2-minute pre-pull so the Red Mage can get 2 melee combos in the opener. Oh, you know what? Now that you've said that, no, there's no chance. Even if it did, nobody's going to do that. Literally, nobody cares about a Red Mage getting 2 melee combos in their opener. Absolutely 0 people will ever agree to that, even if it were something that were theoretically possible. I'd have to pull up my footage, and I'd have to remember where the Red Mage footage is in the first place, which bit of a question mark for me because I didn't keep the greatest track of where all of my individual job footages are. Magnification is not usable outside of combat. I did just check that, though. So, no, we could just completely forget that, and even if it was usable in combat, absolutely nobody was going to wait for that shit. All right, I'm just going to try to lightning round a handful, because there's literally, like, 30 more fucking questions. I scrolled down before continuing, and I was like, oh no, I can't do all of these. Oh man, let's see as a quick one here. Let's see. Any things you'd recommend for somebody who's planning on leaving 14 after the story wrap up? No, just enjoy the final story. If you've got personal reasons why you might not be able to continue playing the game, but you absolutely want to see the finale, then go nuts and have fun. This is not a game where you should feel like you have to keep playing, and the devs don't want that from you either. So no, just I recommend you have a lot of fun on your way out, and that you enjoy the finale to this story, and maybe circumstances will change in the future. Will Sage and Reaper be required for the Amuro? No, they're not going to retroactively update that and make you level an extra job overall. Are Extreme Trials available day 1? Yes, they are available the day of Early Access. Early Access is, for all intents and purposes, launch. It's just a PR 4-day Early Access to get people to commit to buying it early, and that's literally it. Then there was somebody here. What do you think of a Savage raid that could evolve itself along with the raids here by studying different strategies used to beat cheese? No. Listen, well, I'm sure the technology technically exists. You cannot have a boss that dynamically changes to screw people over as they learn to get better, because then nobody's actually getting better. Like, you need things need to be solvable. Like, yes, I know you're specifically referring to if you can cheese it with certain strats, but we call these people the devs. And the devs are perfectly okay with them overlooking something and being, oh man, they figured out. They figured out a way to get around that. Well, you know what? That's our fault. We shouldn't have let that happen, but we're going to let them have it. And honestly, I'm glad the devs are like that, instead of just trying to patch everything every time somebody figures out a way to do something more easily. Now, there are, of course, if there's exploits or abuses that go on that aren't just popping a tank and bone so you don't have to do a specific mechanic, then yeah, they'll probably patch it. But I'm glad that they are largely like, okay, that's because of us. We're going to let you have that. There was one here where I've got 3 alpha plushies. Square Enix keeps sending me alpha plushies. That's it. That's literally the only reason I have 3 of them. Talk to anyone about appearing on State of the Realm? Yes, I have a pretty cool State of the Realm coming up, I think, so please look forward to it. Hi. Take a free hello for anyone who forgets it. I want to know what clipping is. Clipping is when you activate an off-global skill, and it causes your global skill to be delayed. So like if you press it and then you're like starting to press your global, but because of the animation and the latency, your global skill won't activate. This generally pushes the timeline of your skills back during the encounter and causes you to lose overall skill uses across an entire fight. Then someone asked if to 4 Lords trial. Do you think we'll get the 4 Fiends? I think the 4 Fiends are going to be our trials for this expansion. I think one of them, probably Scarmiglione, is going to be a dungeon boss or a solo instance of some kind, and that Cagnazzo, Barbariccia, and Rubicante are going to be an Endwalk. I very much believe that and have predicted it for quite some time, so I'm on your side with that one. I think we can dive fully into the Final Fantasy IV, vibes that we're getting from that one. Then there was another one. Now 45-ish coffers for my retainer for all the AF gear from every capstone quest. Feel like these sets should still be added to the armoire. Can't you, with those sets, can't you just buy them back with either the Calamity Salvager or from what's-his-face in from Granult in the Tempest, depending on the level of the set. Yeah, I think that's fine. As long as I can rebuy them from the Calamity Salvager, I don't personally care if I can store them or not. But, I mean, that's just me. Yeah, I'm not much on keeping that many different items, so I guess I'm kind of the wrong person to ask. Do you want a Blitzball job? No. What else is there? Now that we have a base on how some jobs feel and new skills and reworks, what job are you most excited to play? Dude, I told my raid group I'll play literally like over 75% of the DPS jobs in this game if you want me to for Savage. That's it. I was like, just tell me what you want me to play and I'll play it. Where did Lunar Odin come from? We have to assume they actually have the Zantetsuken in a tower. It's the only way that that's going to be feasibly possible. So I think they had just the Zantetsuken is canonically inside one of the towers at this point. Do you think they can make the dev team can make all crafters share the same hotbars? I don't think they'll do that just because that's something that makes sense when they're all max level, but not when you're leveling them all individually. So I don't think they do that, but I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But that's it. Someone asking if I'll get Asmon on Stay of the Realm. No, probably not. He's going through a lot of stuff right now, and even if he were to agree to it, the last thing I want somebody thinking about is they've got a life situation going on that's taking a large portion of their mental and their mental health and their well-being to handle that and to keep that in check. I think it's bad taste to be like, hey, you want to do a show, and then that has to be something you weigh, because I know when I'm uber stressed, that when somebody asks me to do something, and it's something I would normally say yes to, and it's kind of normal for me to say yes to it, but it weighs on my conscience a little bit, that I would probably just turn it down or get too stressed out about it to actually perform on it. I think it's not that it's disrespectful to ask, but I don't think it's the right time, at the very least. Let's see. Want a Wagyu ribeye? Here's 3 of them. I don't think I'll eat Wagyu for a very long time after having it once, because it's very fatty. It's very difficult to consume. Do you think about Physic Resurrection being made into pet skills? I mean, you could for flavor, but I don't. No, because then if Carbuncle's not out, you can't use them, and that's going to be problematic for other reasons. I don't think there's a good reason to do that. That would be a flavor reason, but not a very good reason. There's a very long question about ping, age, and APM. And I don't know if I'm qualified to answer it. And also, it's a very, very long question that I do not think I have time for this week, even with the lightning round, because it is a very, very, very long description. So I apologize to the person who wrote that all out, but I don't think that's going to happen this week. Do you think the community has grown out of asking Peaches questions? No. No. Not at all. Everyone has a little Peaches question that they want to ask. All right. Peaches, for those you don't know, is a term we use to say that a question is so specific to the individual that it's nigh on useless to everyone else who is hearing the question and the answer. So, or at least one perceives that the question would be useless to other individuals, and so and it originates from somebody asking why we don't have Peaches in Final Fantasy XIV at like a live Q&A that was done. There was one here that was going on this. Oh man, I feel like this is a lot of text as well. Free time, I'd like to make 14 videos. Cool, going with the expectation that it's just a hobby, but I'm not a Savage Raider or anything. I mean, you just have to make content to your speciality. You don't have to make Savage Raiding content on Final Fantasy XIV. You just do whatever it is that reflects what you're doing in the game, and you hope people like it. Is it funny? Is it informative? Is it about glam? Is it about chocobo racing? Whatever. You just do it because you want to do it. It's it at the end of the day. Editing setup. I used to have 2 separate computers for that. I now have one that I use just because it is my most powerful machine. I do have extra PCs in the back. I have spares that I can always use. And one of them, I might actually set up for Endwalker, but I am planning a setup where I can have one recording and rendering and editing PC, and one for live streaming, because I'm going to be live so many hours out of the freaking day for Endwalker that I'd still like to get YouTube videos done, but if I try to do them on the computer I'm streaming on, it's probably not going to work. So having a separate setup, like a mini desk, like over here where my cats normally hang out, is looking like what's going to be the possibility for Endwalker going forward. High skill speed ninja because I was told I couldn't. That's fair. When playing some of the faster class like Ninja and Monk, do the stat squish affect a heavy impact on the GC? No, stat squish doesn't affect anything. It's literally just a change in the numbers on the surface. It doesn't change anything at all. Let's see. And then we had anyone talking about, have you done the quest they added to Sayela? Yes, I did. Then there was here, I've heard you discussing cursed ninja openers. Could you elaborate on what that means? It means that it's so frustratingly, it's very frustrating to execute on because it doesn't feel like it feels like it's wrong almost, even though it's completely right, because you're doing things that are just so out of the realm of the norm for the job. You're deliberately sacking trick attack potency in order to get more overall potency across the entire fight. And that's a very, very strange thing to do. Not to mention that they have 6 gap closers in their opener. It's literally only their gap closing, forked and fleeting, as well as their ninjutsus, whether it be Raitan, Hyosho, TCJ. That's literally all they're ever doing in their openers on top of all their OGCDs. So it's regularly anything where you have to like force a very specific set of gameplay parameters to play optimally. It leads to something being called cursed because it's very finicky, very exact, and you almost wish it wasn't the most optimal way to play. Someone asked why there's not a lot of Dark Knight NPCs. I mean, if you do the Dark Knight story quest, you find out very quickly as to why there's not very many Dark Knights actually just running around for the most part. Thank you for your advice from a few weeks ago. Most practice groups barely make it to tiles before disbanding. I really need to be here. Half should I keep looking for practice, look for duty completion? I'd say if you can get past tiles, you can start looking for duty completion more than anything else, because you've basically gotten past the hardest parts of the fight. But the meteors at the end are really the big thing. So as long as if you can find stuff that's progging meteors or bramble or second brambles, that's probably going to be your most ideal situation. What did you want the next exploration zone to be? The moon. The dark side of the moon. There we go. We'll find Mario over there doing the crazy things he has to do on the darker side of the moon. Let's see. Tries to force certain skills on the player, even though the majority of players the skill is useless. Why hasn't dissipation been fixed? I mean, dissipation actually, it lost a little bit of efficacy. So dissipation's an insanely effective MP management tool now. What it isn't is a great, here's the thing, it is a great healing cooldown, but it's very rarely used for that reason. Most people use it as an MP boost, which is going to go away because energy drains aren't going to give you MP anymore. Yeah, with the energy drain losing MP. Yeah, in fact, you hit on all that. Why are they trying to keep a skill like this? Because dissipation is still, at the end of the day, supposed to be a healing cooldown. So now, what it's likely to do is to save you MP in sheer healing efficacy plus the amount of ether flows that you're going to have access to. The fairy is great and all, but when your fairy only has embrace off cooldown and you can deliberately plan around that, dissipation is an incredibly powerful tool for getting through a lot of that stuff, whether it's the shield buffs that you're getting from the healing restoration buff, or you're actually just getting an extra Adlo when you would need it, an extra Indom when you would need it, an extra XCOG when you need it, any of these things, it actually ends up working fairly well. So that's why they want to reaffirm that it's not MP, it's not damage, it's got some damage functionality, but you can use it largely as a healing raid cooldown, which is its initial intention. And they're just trying to push it more in that direction. Oh man, there's so many questions. Should I avoid EX and since chances to get kicked out of parties because I can't optimize better? No, EX, dude, people play, I'm not gonna lie, people very often drag themselves through EXs with barely understanding how to play the game. And the fact that you're conscious of the fact that you maybe don't optimize to 100% means you're probably already playing better than a lot of other people do in the party finders that I join. So you're actually more the kind of person I would prefer to have, because you're actually considerate of your skill level versus other people, which means that you probably play better in the first place and that you're overly critical of yourself. That's just a projection on what I think is actually happening, but I'm willing to bet you I'm right. There's so many questions. I've been lightning around for like 10 minutes. Sly posted, okay, so people asking about Sly's interview, he actually posted that on his YouTube channel. Be sure to go check it out. There's one, dislike current Bard. Do you think you'll like it better? Yes, I think Bards are going to be much happier in Endwalker, especially if you enjoyed Stormblood Bard and wish they had done more with Shadowbringers Bard to bring it more in line with the other jobs in terms of quality of life. They are not aware of the blood weapon for Dark Knight. No, it just means it hasn't reached them in an effective manner. So please keep reporting stuff on blood weapon, because us talking about it on live streams and Reddit is not the same as the developers being handed a report that says, hey, a lot of people don't really want blood weapon to work this way. But I have a feeling blood weapon's going to get changed given the amount of feedback they've probably received from it. We don't know much about Island Sanctuary. We know it's releasing sometime in 6.x, probably in 6.1x if I had to take a guess, but we don't know for certain. We might learn more about that in the near future. Vague memory or showed off new primal mounts we were getting for Stormblood. We won't see a primal mount show off until probably November 5th at the earliest. And they generally show off the new primal mounts each an individual patch for, like, you know, this is the level, this is the 6.1 primal mount, the 6.2 primal mount, etc., etc. So, yeah, that's where I'm going with that answer. Don't know how to really use them. Can you give me a rundown of how they work? The tier 3 Grand Company buffs, don't you just craft them with the ethereal wheel using your FC house? And then you just load them into your FC actions like you would any other FC action? I don't actually use them myself because I don't run an FC, but I'm pretty sure that's all you have to do for it. This one's a little too long for me to answer, so I apologize. It's got like 1, 2, 3 questions, or 1, 2, 3 points being made about the Lilybell, and I've already talked to death about the Lilybell, so I guess I'm just going to go past that one. PS5 version, but I play the PS4 version because PS5 has issues with the PS4 version, and the PS4 is more stable frame rate. I have no idea. I haven't actually kept up on any of the updates to the PS5 version of Final Fantasy XIV, so you'd have to ask someone who has played it a little bit more. Is there a raid you'd like to see in the future? I don't really like to predict raids in the future that much. Sometimes in the moment I'll do it, but I like to see what they'll come up with, and I like original ideas more than anything else, personally. Let's see. And then I think I finally caught up, but then there's a bunch of questions that I scrolled past because I either didn't have proper answers for them or something along the lines. Are there any resources for seeing the skills and rotations for Reaper? Well, no, because we only had 7 hours and no one was sitting there doing a perfect rotation so that you could see it 100% out. You'd have to go to the Balance Discord to see the rotation, but even then you wouldn't have a visual to go with it because people don't have free access to just play Reaper and get what a visual best opener is actually going to look like. You won't have that till November 19th. Somebody asked me if I have videos on my HUD layout. They are, but they're old, but they're still largely relevant. I explained my thought process there, and that still largely remained the same. Somebody also asked earlier what my favorite numbered series was. I skipped that earlier when I was talking about Final Fantasy IX. That would be Final Fantasy VI. Someone asking why they don't just call neutral sect nocturnal sect now, because of what is it neutral between when they don't have a nocturnal sect to begin with. I agree. Do you think encounter design and Endwalker will be bounced around all the new healing and the new healing tools that the tanks and healers have? No, I don't think it'll be that much more difficult, especially the casual content. I don't suspect you'll see much more use out of these tools. And even in serious endgame content, it'll just be high skill players making use of them in largely familiar situations to what we already have now. What else do we have here? There's the new plotline question. There's is Hildebrand making a comeback? They said they gave him a break in Shadowbringer, so we probably will see him again in Endwalker. They said is Eggy Glam is dead? No, we don't know that. They said that it was going some revisions given the changes that they were making to the job. But they'll probably, I just hope they add the rest of the carbuncles. Seems that's all that person is asking as well. Then there was something about Venomous and Windbite still being at 30 seconds. I don't know. I mean, the tooltips probably say that, but we wouldn't have had access to those lower level skills. There's no way we could have accessed it because we can only do one dungeon or that dungeon in Explorer mode. So there's no way I could give you a proper answer outside of what the tooltips themselves actually say. Someone who called me by like a nickname of my first name, I'm going to level with you. If I don't know who you are and you try to like give me a nickname with my first name, I'm probably just going to skip your question because I don't know you like that. So, you know, don't just jump to conclusions thinking you can just give me cute nicknames and I'm going to answer a question. That's like an easy way to get your answer skipped, as a matter of fact. Somebody asking if all the tentacle creatures are lunar Shivas. No, those are Terminus beasts. I think the ice is just the ether flow being all... I think it's just cinematic. I don't think it'll actually play that important a role, because even in some of the artwork for one of the dungeons we see in Thavnair, it's on fire. So I think fire is what I think we're still going to continue to see. I think it's more representative of just the etheric flow being entirely screwed up. And it could even be a reference to the giant skull in the area, because there's a lot of ether packed in Thavnair. This was the Dark Knight one. Somebody asking about duels. Do you think they should add a way to force duel spawns? I think it's fine the way it is right now. It's not too difficult to get into one, and it's going to be easier when people move on from Boj to overall, so I don't think that's really worth changing, but I wouldn't mind if they did either. Wondering if affect my... Wait. Devs have addressed this. I'm currently playing on PS5, but I pre-ordered Endwalker on PS4. If it shows I have Endwalker on the Mog Station, but not on the PlayStation Store, I was wondering, you know. I have no idea if you can pre-order on the PS4, but then play the PS5 version, because that doesn't make sense to me that you'd be able to do that. So I'd be willing to bet you probably needed to pre-order the PS5 version, or you'll have to wait till November 23rd to do an Endwalker upgrade. I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea how that situation works. So you might want to take that to the actual official forums and try to get a more direct answer. I think I just need to stop. There's so many. There's so many. The lightning round was almost more than half the fucking video. So I think I need to wrap this up here, get this edited and rendered, because I said I was tired and I still wanted to answer as many things as humanly possible. I just can't. It's so many. I appreciate asking all the questions, but I think I'm going to have to wrap that one up there just because it's too many. I didn't really realize how many I was taking on. So thank you for asking your questions for this week's weekly Q&A. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And if you have a question, ask it in the comment section of the video below. Hopefully, I'll be able to get to it next time. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to it next time. But thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you all next week. Until then, take care.